Eat, sleep, work, repeat. I don't know about you, but lockdown life makes it feel like we're living in the 90s comedy Groundhog Day. What happens? We get up, we have some breakfast, we go back to our room to work, then it's time to grab some lunch. If we're lucky, we manage to get out for our daily walk before it's back to our desk for the next Zoom meeting. Then we make some dinner if we can be bothered, or else we order some takeaway if we can't. And then it's time to slump in front of Netflix for a bit before heading to bed, ready to do it all again tomorrow. And if you've got young kids at home like we've had for homeschooling, well, it's more like Groundhog Hour, where over the course of 60 minutes, you have to put them back in front of their online lesson, find that lost worksheet, grab the pencil that's fallen under the table and tell them that no, it's still not time for another snack. Monday rolls into Tuesday, which rolls into Wednesday, which rolls into Thursday, doing the same thing again and again. Eat, sleep, work, repeat. Lockdown life, it can be so monotonous, and it can leave you asking, what's there to gain when every day is the same? And if you feel like that, well, you're not alone. If you Google lockdown monotony, you get over 600,000 results. Second on the Google list is this article from The Guardian. Its headline looks promising, but when these things make the top 25 ways to break lockdown boredom, taking a new route to the shops, splurging on herbs to spice up your dinner, or hypnotising yourself. Well, I'm not sure that our friends at The Guardian have all the answers. And so that got me thinking, well, maybe we don't need new ideas to get us through what's left of lockdown. Perhaps some ancient wisdom could help us navigate our very modern pandemic. And that thought brought to mind these words from a book of the Bible called Ecclesiastes. Meaningless, meaningless, said the teacher. Utterly meaningless. Everything is meaningless. These words were written some 3,000 years ago, but they could have well been written for the time in which we live. After all, who hasn't got to the end of a day and felt like that? Oh, utterly meaningless. What was the point of all that? Well, we're not told exactly who the teacher who wrote these words was, but it's quite likely that he was wise King Solomon, a man who knew what he was talking about when it came to wisdom. And as he goes on, we get a deeper sense of what he's getting at, describing everything as meaningless, when he asks this: what do people gain from all their labours at which they toil under the sun? Now, the language of gain here, it's the language of the marketplace. And here's what the teacher observes. We all put things into life, and we all take things out of life. And then he asks this: what will our closing balance be? Will any of us make a profit when all is said and done? Now, for some of us, I guess the gain we look for is financial. For us, it's all about the bottom line. Whereas others of us, we might strive for significance. We want our lives to have counted for something. Others still may be looking for a legacy, to leave a lasting impression upon the world. Or maybe you want to be able to look back on a life of satisfaction, knowing that you've enjoyed your time. But when every day's the same, we start to wonder whether there is anything to gain, whether we can make a profit in life. And so the teacher invites us to step back and to ask a question: is gain in life even possible? And to answer his question, he takes us to the natural world. And as he looks at the natural world, he observes this: the sun rises and the sun sets, and it hurries back to where it rises. Now, it's obviously a poetic picture rather than a science lesson. And it's a picture of this, a picture of nothing changing. Despite all the sun's labours, all it does is rise and set, rise and set. Well, that's the sun, and as the teacher looks around, it turns out it's just the same with the wind. He says, the wind blows to the south and turns to the north. Round and round it goes, ever returning on its course. No matter which way the wind blows, he says, it always returns to where it began. And then he gives us a picture which is something to really excite the geography teacher. And I've got to be honest with you, there's not a whole bunch in the Bible to get the geography teacher's heart racing. So if that's you, now's the moment to sit up and enjoy this verse. He says this, all streams flow into the sea, yet the sea is never full. To the place the streams come from, there they return again. Do you see what he's saying? Even the water cycle just goes around and around and around. It may look like progress is being made as the streams flow into the sea, well, but then they just return back to where they began. Now you may be thinking, what's the point the teacher is trying to make with all these views of the natural world? Well, it's this. Creation doesn't gain. It doesn't achieve anything of lasting significance. It just treads its well-trodden path again and again and again. And if, as the teacher also says, that generations come and generations go, but the earth remains forever. In other words, if we're here just for a fraction of the time that the earth's been here for, and the earth doesn't make a gain, well, what hope have we got of profiting in life? This is what the teacher's getting at when he describes everything as meaningless, when he says that trying to gain in life, whatever it may be that we're looking for, is utterly meaningless. It's futile. There's no point in even trying, he says, because we won't do it. And even if we persuade ourselves that no, he's wrong and that gain is possible, well, he's got news for us, because there's no satisfaction to be found. All things are wearisome, more than one can say. The eye never has enough of seeing, nor the ear its fill of hearing. Living for gain, says the teacher, it's wearisome, because whether we're after money or significance or a legacy or satisfaction, we'll never have enough. We'll always want just that little bit more. And even if we think we can beat the system, even if we think we will stand to gain at the end of our lives, well, the teacher has news for us. A bit later on in this book of Ecclesiastes, we read these words. The teacher says, I hated all the things I had toiled for under the sun, because I must leave them to the one who comes after me. And who knows whether that person will be wise or foolish. You can't take your gain with you, the teacher says. And after you're gone, well, your descendants may well just fritter it all away. You see, it turns out there's nothing to gain in a world where every day is the same. In fact, there's nothing to gain in our normal world, because even if we can't quite see it, every day still is the same. And I guess at this point you're probably thinking, well, if this is the world we live in, what can we possibly do? Where else can we turn? Well, the teacher's answer is remarkably simple. Here's what he'd have us do. He'd have us give up on gain. To give up on gain. To recognise that pursuing more money or looking for that thing we think might really satisfy us is as futile as going after the gold at the end of the rainbow. He'd have us accept that the dream of living a significant life or making that lasting impression on the world is a mirage on the horizon that we'll never quite reach. The teacher would have us give up on gain. But here's the surprising thing. It's as we give up on gain that we discover the freedom that we thought having more would bring us. You see, when we give up on gain, we're free from the exhaustion that comes from pretending that we can beat the system. We're free from the weariness that comes from waiting for that day when we're a better version of ourselves, living the life we really want to live. We're free from the frustration that comes from never having that little bit more. We're free from the envy that comes from others having more than us. You see, giving up on gain, it frees us from those things that we don't want to be trapped by. And it frees us to do the things that we want to do. You see, if we're no longer grasping after gain, well, we're free to live generously with big hearts and open hands, holding lightly to the things that we do have. We're free to be content, to enjoy the good gifts that God has given us, no matter how big or how small they are. And paradoxically, when we give up on gain under the sun, in this frustrating world where everything's the same, nothing changes, we actually open ourselves up to the possibility of sharing in the ultimate gain. 1,000 years after the teacher spoke these words that we've been looking at, Jesus said something remarkably similar. He said this: "What good is it for someone to gain the whole world, yet forfeit their soul?" Jesus said that if we gained the whole world, we would do so at the cost of our souls, at the cost of the core of our being. And when we put what Jesus is saying alongside the teacher's message, that gain in this world is impossible, well, what Jesus is describing is foolish twice over. Not only would we do it at the cost of our souls, but we can't even do it in the first place. But just before Jesus spoke those words, he said this. He said, "Whoever wants to save their life will lose it. But whoever loses their life for me and the gospel will save it." Jesus says if we stop toiling for ourselves, which won't get us anywhere anyway, and we give our lives to him, we stand to make the most extraordinary gain, saving our souls. And we'll do that not just for life in this world with all its frustrations, but for life in the frustration-free world to come. You see, if Jesus is right, if what he's saying is true, there's eternal gain on offer to us. If Jesus is right, ironically, when we give up on gain, we stand to make the most, which is really good news for the world we find ourselves living in. Because it's a world in which there is absolutely nothing to gain when every day is the same. But then, according to the teacher, as we were thinking, well, it's always been like that. It's just that our eyes have been opened to this truth by the pandemic we find ourselves living through. But if we give up on gain, and if we give ourselves to Jesus, well, not only will this life be less frustrating, but we will stand to make the most incredible gain ever: life in a frustration-free world to come. It's no wonder that a Christian called Jim Elliot once spoke these words, which I'll leave with you. He said this: He is no fool who gives what he cannot keep to gain that which he cannot lose.